So many years ago, I started my spiritual path and was very thirsty for knowledge, thirsty for understandings of concepts that I've either ignored or had no idea were out there. And in that search, I was introduced to books like the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, the idea of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And as excited as I was to read these books, I was also confused by a lot of what they were saying or the metaphors they used, and just my inability at the time to decipher what was going on. So looked for teachers, looked for help in any kind of way I could. There's a beautiful gentleman named Eknath Iswaran that wrote translations of the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and Dhammapada with prefaces on each chapter, which was really, really helpful. But I still needed a teacher, and enter Peter Bolland. So a couple years ago, I was looking on YouTube to any help to help me find an understanding of these scriptures, and I found Peter Bolland's YouTube channel where he has just beautiful breakdowns of not all of, but where he has beautiful breakdowns of a lot of these seemingly difficult books, stories, poems, and it makes it approachable. So today I'm going to have Peter on to talk about how we can look at what these metaphors mean to us. Not necessarily what's the meaning of the Dhammapada, what's the meaning of the Bhagavad Gita, but how does that meaning land with you? How do those words and those lessons land in your life? Really excited to talk with Peter about his story, about how he got to the point where he's at in life, about how he has made it one of his life's choices to really help people figure out how this knowledge and how this information lands with them. I'm deeply grateful for Peter's time. Hope you get something out of the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. Where we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, Healing.com. adamrealhealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Peter Bolland. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm talking with a new friend, Mr. Peter Bolland. So I discovered Peter in my personal quest to find more clarity in spiritual text. I've been reading through the Mahabharata, the Gita, the Ramayana, the Upanishads, like all these different books through the past probably decade of my life, and in getting help here and there, like I find little bits and pieces, little bits of clarity. Even we'll talk about Eknath Iswaran. He wrote a bunch of translations of these books, but also prefaced each chapter with like an understanding of what you're about to read, which was helpful. But for me, it didn't really, I still needed a teacher of some sort, and I just didn't know where to look. So I looked on where Americans look now, is on YouTube, right? So I looked on YouTube and I found Peter Bolland. And Peter has this beautiful YouTube channel where he breaks down the Tao, the Gita, the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell. The Upanishads are the most recent ones that I've been watching from yourself. And it's just a beautiful way to kind of like hold my hand through the understandings of what these scriptures and these words really, how they land with me as a person. And so through that, I've been listening to you probably about a year now at least. And just, took a shot, and I'm like, hey man, I wonder if this guy would love to come on my show and help me talk about this stuff more and maybe create a relationship. And by God, here we are. So Peter is just a plethora of amazing things. So musician, you have a YouTube channel, you're a professor at Southwestern College, you're a surfer, you have all these amazing things that you do. And I'm just so grateful when I meet people that I feel like they're living their dharma, and they're just like, they're doing the things that make them happy, the passionate things about their lives. But you're still helping people. It's not like, I'm just going to go surf all day and make music, and that's just what I'm going to do. It's like, no, also I'm a professor, and I also started this YouTube channel because there's a lot of people out there like Adam that don't understand this stuff, but that really want to. So Peter, dude, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to dive into your journey with you and to help us understand some of these spiritual texts a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a thrill to be on Journey of the Modern Soul, and hello to everybody out there. I've been diving into your work too,
Mm.
and it's it's a fascinating thing how our passions, how our interests kind of build friendships, build community. People find each other in this new digital sphere that
Mm.
we all have one toe dipped into pretty much 24 hours a day. And YouTube is an incredible tool, with absolute, with reams of absolute garbage, because I don't know, I read somewhere something like 70,000 videos are uploaded every second or something
I,
like that. I can't even imagine how
that's
big YouTube's servers
I
are.
know.
Probably an entire island in Iceland somewhere, but there is a lot of content, right? So it's fascinating how people of like interests, like you and I, and like the folks listening, kind of find each other
Mm.
in the middle of those infinite spaces. And I'm very grateful for that. I don't know how any of it works.
Yep.
Just do what I do and see what happens next.
Heck yeah. Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about YouTube now, or just digital media in general. There like you said, there's a lot of just content out there. We can get lost in the content, but we now have the ability to really find people or find the answers that make sense to us. And right, wrong, or indifferent. Again, there's echo chambers out there that we can find ourselves in. But if anything, I'm really happy to find myself in your echo chamber because it seems like we find the teachers. I guess my favorite quote is when the teacher's ready or the student's ready, the teacher appears.
Right.
And that's basically what it was. Like I need a teacher. I don't have time to find a teacher. Like I've got so much busyness in my life, but I have an hour every day that I sit and meditate. And so now I've integrated your talks into my, some of those hours of the day and help me kind of like digest what's happened throughout that day through some of these spiritual texts. So, so one of my things that I love about listening to what the way you talk and to reading your biography is that you've kind of lived this amazingly like seemingly whimsical life at times. Like you surfed for a long time when you were younger. You talk about being on the beach a lot, making music. But and then we transition now, years later, and you're still making music, you're still surfing, but now you've integrated this spiritual work and this professorship into your life. And so, I mean, one of the things I love about people is very rarely do we end up where we started. Right. And so I just, from all the things that you do right now, I would just love to know how you got to the spiritual path that you're on and the kind of the understandings of how this inner workings land with your life. Because I know a lot of surfers out there, and a lot of the surfers that I know are very just in touch with the world and the universe in a very nonsensical way. It's not like a very taught way. It's just they feel it. They're in touch with the ocean, they're in touch with the waters, they're in touch with the land. And whether that's, you can put a spiritual label on that, or if that's just, they've just felt it and that's understanding to them and that's just beautiful, that's great too. Right. So was that was an avenue in your early years of did you have spirituality in those early years, or were you really just embracing that freedom of a surfer life?
I think the ocean was a great teacher, and I don't want to romanticize the whole sport. There's some real there's some a-holes out there who have surfboards, but
Yeah.
but there's something about the activity, and I don't know if it shaped me or I was just drawn to it for certain reasons. But I grew up in Ventura, and there was just the beach always there, and there was always fog in the air, and so we always just ended up at the beach, and me and my pals played in the water all the time. And when we got old enough, got a surfboard. And as I was not interested in competitive sports, I never played team sports. I
Mm.
was more of a kind of a loner, but I loved bike riding and hiking and surfing, and surfing particularly because it's unstructured. There's no clock. There's no score. There's no competition. I know there are these things called surf contests, kind
Yeah.
of a weird aberration. It's like it's like finger painting contests. How do you tell who won? I really don't know. But surfing is an activity where you are, even if you go with your friend, you're not really with them. You're off by yourself.
Mm,
There's a lot of silence. There's a lot of watching and waiting. There's a lot of paying attention,
mm,
and and out 365 days a year under in all kinds of weather. So you just get used to being out under the sky and on the sea, which is this liquid landscape without landmarks. And I suppose that all just sort of non-verbally gets under your skin.
mm,
And I was always, in as a kid in school, interested in creative writing and poetry and reading, Ray Bradbury and Lord of the Rings and all that stuff you read when you're a kid,
mm-hmm.
and sci-fi, and then music came along. I was in a musical family. All my two older brothers played, and so that was just part of our kind of creative life. My mom was an artist. My home was filled with furniture and carving that my grandfather had made, and my dad was always writing. So that was kind of the
Mm,
environment of the Bolland house. And so I didn't decide to become a college professor until much, much, much later. I had the privilege of, just being kind of a working class kid and growing up in the 70s and 80s, and college was still affordable enough then where you could have this little dumb part-time job and pay your way through school.
mm-hmm.
And my mom and dad didn't go to college, and they were extremely supportive and just happy that I was going to college.
Mm,
And so I never got the kind of pressure some of my students now get, which is you have to pick the right major. College is just for careers. I never heard that message. So I literally was able to study whatever I wanted. And I fell into a philosophy class in my first year in college at Ventura College, a community college. And I had a great teacher. And that's where I first heard about Buddha and
mm.
Socrates and Plotinus. And I'm like, what? This is a thing? There are people who for thousands of years have been wondering about the kind of things that I've always wondered about. And so I majored in philosophy and had no idea. I wasn't even burdened with the question, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Which was, I look back and I realized what an incredible freedom I felt. Who gave me permission to do that? I have no idea. But I finished there and I transferred up the road to UC Santa Barbara. And there I changed my major to religious studies because it was even more interesting to me.
Okay.
Even though I didn't grow up in a religious home, we never went to church or anything like that. But there were hints all around me. My dad had a bunch of books on Swedenborg, and sometimes my mom and dad would drive to Ojai on Sundays to hear Krishnamurti
Mm,
talk, and I never went because I'm a dumb teenager. Who cares about that,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And now later I'm like, God, I really missed out on a
Uh-huh.
chance with Krishnamurti. But up in Santa Barbara at the University of California, there I got a chance to study with all these great, academics who were doing, people who actually know Sanskrit, which I
Mm,
don't. And that world has its charms. It's not a place I gravitated to professionally. I ended up stopping with a master's degree, and so I just teach at a community college. I don't have a PhD. I couldn't teach at a 4-year if I wanted to, because when I got to my master's degree finally in philosophy at San Diego State, that was enough.
mm,
And my target was, and this occurred to me only after I got married in my late 20s. I realized I need to go get a job,
mm,
like a real job, and not just work at a supermarket, which I'd been doing for a long, long, long time, which I loved. One of those jobs where you put on a name tag, and you punch a clock, and
mm-hmm.
and it was great,
Yeah.
and it was a union job, and it paid the bills. But I felt a calling to kind of, I started thinking back on those early community college classes, and I thought maybe I could do that.
Mm,
That's a weird way to kind of meld my interests as I didn't know I was a public speaker then, but I loved ideas and I loved creating content and writing, and I was already a performer as a musician. I thought maybe I could get in front of a classroom and help people find the life in these classic ideas.
Mm. So it's almost like the Dharma was always there for you. It's just waiting for you to like realize the skills that you have to step towards that. You know, there's
That's yeah.
I was a yoga teacher, teacher trainer for a long time. So I do teach yoga in the off times, but I also used to hold classes to help people learn how to teach. And one of the things that, you know, that I think people lose the understanding of is your transferable skills. Like you've got so many skills as whatever age adult that you've made it to or person that you've made it to. Draw on those skills. Like you might not be a teacher, but you've played in front of people before, or you've played shows before, right? So that's holding space. That's performance, right? It's just in a different way. You know, so there's all these different skills that through life that we've gathered that we might have ignored and be like, oh God, I don't even know why I went through that experience. But hey, here I am as a 42-year-old man. Now I know how to hold space in front of all these people that might not want to hear the message I'm saying, but I can still feel comfortable in front of them, you know?
Yeah, it's really true, and I of course learned more about Dharma as I went on this very rich Hindu idea that
Mm,
you just referenced. And there's these two meanings of Dharma in Hinduism, right? Dharma kind of, I think, perhaps primarily means the structure of reality itself, like how Brahman pours all of this forth,
mm,
all the energy and matter and consciousness in the universe is an emanation of the one. And it's not chaotic. There's a kind of pattern here, what Taoism might call the Tao, or what Greeks might call logos. There's a pattern and a structure, and it includes natural law and cosmic order, but it also includes kind of subtler energy systems and consciousness systems where maybe people have a dharma, maybe they have a purpose,
mm,
a calling. And without getting too concrete or specific about it, there's a perhaps a poetic sense in which each of us is the manifestation in embodied form of the infinite formless oneness, or Brahman.
mm,
And so in that sense, your life matters. It has purpose. And when you feel that kind of enthusiastic zeal for something, maybe love is showing you where you best can offer whatever you've been given to share in the sustenance of the Dharma, to pick up your end
right.
and to live in service, what in Hebrew we call tikkun olam, to help heal the world.
Mm,
And that's where our own joy is. Like the Dalai Lama said, compassionate action is the ultimate form of self-interest.
right.
And so all work is service. Even when I worked at Vaughn's and I was trimming celery and putting it on top of the other celery, and sweeping the floor, I was helping people build meals for
Mm,
their families. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. And now I'm helping 19 to 24-year-olds out of community college, most of whom are not going to be philosophy majors,
yeah.
half of whom are statistically never even going to graduate with a degree, because my college, like all colleges, has about a 50% success rate.
Right.
And I have that in my mind. It's like I don't need my students to go off and become philosophy professors. I'm interested. Some of them might, like
Hmm.
I did, but that's 1%. What I'm really thinking about is things like Dharma.
Hmm.
Like when you go and be a realtor, when you go and raise a family, when you go sell cars, how do you understand that work? When you sign up and enlist in the Navy, how do you understand that work as part of your way of sacred service?
Right.
And that's an endless question for me.
It is. And, I never even realized that, our everyday work can be that sacred service until I went to a Vipassana, my first Vipassana a number of years ago. And the voice of Goenka was talking about being a householder. And I think it was like the third or fourth day when, the hips are dying or my knees are on fire. I've been sitting for 11 hours straight for 3 days. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And then, they talk about, then they layer on those little beautiful messages of, hey, not everybody can be a monk. Not everybody can be a nun. This is why we go try these things so we can see what it's like. You're a householder, right? You have responsibilities. Be aware of your responsibilities. And I think what you're just saying about being working at a grocery store, trimming the celery, sweeping the floor. We can create a story in our head about like, oh my God, I have so much better shit to do with my life than trim this
Mhm.
goddamn celery and sweep this floor. But we could also not create that story. We can, live in that different story of, I can't wait for this next family to pick up this head of celery and go home and make a beautiful meal with it right off this clean floor that they're not going to slip on and have to go to the hospital and not be able to make their meal, right? We can have that story be that story as well. But sometimes we just go towards that, like, I can't believe this is what I'm doing with my time. But that
Yeah.
time that we have, like, if you can appreciate the time that you have and create a little bit of joy or create your own beautiful story about it, everything can be magical and everything can be beautiful. It's like how we put our twist on it.
Yeah, it's a it's such a cliche we've all heard, but it's not a new world we want. It's new eyes with which to see the world,
Mm,
and I think so many people suffer needlessly because they restlessly search for that perfect career, that perfect relationship with that perfect person, that perfect town
right.
to live in, that perfect blend of rural and urban, with the hip places to go, but not too crowded. And, it's like, I just think about that Buddhist idea about how we generate suffering through all of our craving. And
Mm,
this is not the counsel of you should just put up with whatever, banality you're stuck in. Of course, we're restless. Of course, we're always working to transform inwardly and outwardly ourselves and the environment around us. But to not be capable of being grateful under almost any conditions and then continue to work to change those conditions at the same time,
right.
that's the golden ticket, it seems to me. And I don't know when it happened, Adam, but it got to this point where I finally realized that having a band, making albums, booking shows, getting on stage, trying to publicize the show so that the audience is full, and then guest speaking at Unitarian churches and hoping a lot of people show up, or looking at my enrollment numbers and at Southwestern College, or how many people are reading my blog, or now that I've been doing this YouTube channel the last couple of years, how many views do I have and all that stuff?
Hmm.
All that, you always want to think about your audience, because your audience means impact, because that's our work product, right? Is communication and transformation.
Right.
And that's what happens no matter what I'm doing. So I really feel like all my different little modes of expression, or careers, if you will, or lines of work, are all sort of forms of one thing,
Hmm.
and it all roots very much back to Dharma for me, and it's very humbling that I get to be of service in all of these different ways. That's not to say I'm some sort of selfless saint, obviously not. I'm just egoic guy. I have ambition. I am envious of people who have more views than I do.
Right.
I look at what they do and I think, how could I improve my stuff? So, those are that's the paradoxical truth of it, is that, this is the battlefield of the Bhagavad Gita, right? There is conflict, there is struggle,
Yeah.
and we are trying to build something here. And sometimes there are countervailing forces that we have to outsmart or overcome.
Hmm.
And it's not a war of all against all. I think there's much more cooperation than there is competition. But I don't want to romanticize these truths that through that competition is also an incredibly powerful sifter.
Mm.
It helps me sift my priorities. What should I be working on today?
Right. It's I love that you mentioned the Gita. One of the things that drew me to that was my initial interest in Gandhi. I read an autobiography about Gandhi, and he talked about the Gita a lot. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'll switch to that. And it was really interesting because yet again, I didn't know how to translate it. I didn't know how to read it for the depth of it. I just read it at face value, and I'm like, why is Gandhi a pacifist promoting war? And for me, like I always consider myself a pacifist. What I realize now is I was just too focused on inaction. I was afraid to take action because I was afraid of the results. So I just called myself a pacifist. I'm like, oh, they just do as they are. But but just having that book and then having an understanding of reading into that in a deeper way, lets you understand that like there is a depth to these scriptures, to these words there's a surface value to it, but there's how does it land with you? And that with me, with the Gita, initially, again, like I was like, well, this doesn't make sense because it's promoting aggression. But it showed me how ignorant I was towards my own ability or inability to confront people, to stand up for what I felt was right for me, or, not to use my truth as a sword, but also just to say like, hey, I'm seeing this about you or about this situation, and having the confidence to say, this is what I say, or this is what I see. But when I didn't have my path figured out, I didn't have something to question. I didn't have an answer to look back to, right? So once I found out my path, and like you were saying, like all the things that we do in our life are moving towards this one thing, right? So now I'm a sound healer. I do yoga. I do Reiki. So all the work that I'm doing is to help humanity in some kind of way. So that's my guiding light. So if I have something that comes up that says, "Hey, Adam, do you want to start an air conditioning business?" Well, does that line up with helping people in the way that I'm helping? No, it doesn't. Cool. Okay, so I have my answer. But until we have that path that we can really kind of weigh those answers against, anything can be an option. Like freedom is very intimidating if you really think about it, because you don't have a path if you're freedom, like true freedom. If you don't define it, anything can happen, right? So having a path of having an understanding of where you're funneling your energy towards, I didn't realize how important that was until I did.
Yeah, I worked at Vaughn's. If you're not from California, maybe that's a big supermarket chain, right?
Okay.
So, um, and I worked there 2 weeks after I turned 16. I walked in there and got a job bagging groceries, and I basically stayed into my late 30s.
Mm.
Always part time. That's how I got through college. It's how I got through grad school. It's I got married. I was still working there, and into about my first 5 years as a part time college professor, an adjunct professor, I kept that job and just worked nights so I could pay the bills
Hmm.
and have a name tag and have a union job and be able to afford to go to the dentist and stuff. So, um, that's just that working class thing that I think my family kind of instilled in me. It's like, don't be so romantic that you drop everything and go follow all your dreams. You have to live in the real world, and that was a job I could do that I could kind of morally justify. I wasn't hurting anybody, right? I was just
Right.
like doing my little vegetable stand thing, and I mention that again because that that made so much of the rest of it possible. And the Bhagavad Gita is a real eye opener for me. I came to it exactly as you did. My that very first philosophy teacher at Ventura College,
Hmm.
his name was Barrett Calmback. He recommended Gandhi's autobiography, so I read that, and it's called my autobiography, My Experiments with Truth.
Yes.
And that phrase always stuck with me. It's like what a beautiful way to approach philosophy, sort of in a pragmatic way. Like if this practice or if this concept um, creates measurable beneficial outcomes, then it has value. And if it doesn't, then I'll just think, well, that's for somebody else. I'll keep looking.
Hmm.
And he kind of went through, Gandhi kind of went through a lot of things. He grew up vegetarian. He tried eating meat and it was a disaster for him. So he just said, vegetarianism is right for me. But I'm not going to dogmatize about it. I'm not going to tell anybody else to do it. This is right for me.
Hmm.
And that made an indelible impact on me. That idea of pragmatic testing of truth. And so I too then went to the Gita and like was shocked to find that this is a book on the surface that seems pro-war and pro-conflict and pro-violence. For anybody not familiar with the Gita, I'll give you the 60-second summary. You have this scene where these two characters, Arjuna and Krishna, are on the battlefield before the battle begins. And Arjuna is the general of one army. And he says to his chariot driver, Krishna, I don't think we should fight. I think it's immoral if we fight. Isn't murder wrong? And he has this big anxiety attack and he drops his bow and he says, I'm not doing it. And Krishna says to him, you have to get up and you have to fight. And Krishna spends the next 18 chapters basically teaching Arjuna and all of us the necessity of taking action here in the field of action. And far from the first impression that this is a pro-war book, Gandhi's interpretation really had power for me, namely that this quote unquote battlefield is a big metaphor for our lives, which are of necessity ringed round by conflict. That I have to eat food, for example, every day to live, and that means I'm going to put 2,000 calories, 3,000 calories of formerly living things into this hole in the front of my face, and I can choose plant or animal products or animal food. There's all these decisions to make, but the fact remains I am going to kill other things to promote my own life, and that's going to cause harm. And so ahimsa, or nonviolence, has to always be contextualized in the reality that to exist is to cause some harm. And I was really moved, and Gandhi explores this in his autobiography so beautifully. It's not about perfect pacifism, perfect harmlessness. It's about how can I roll back and minimize the amount of suffering that my existence necessarily causes. And that was a really subtle way that drew me away from absolute declarations to use the Buddhist phrase, that kind of middle path, what Buddhists call upaya, or skillful means. So let me live as skillfully as possible, not beholden to some bizarre absolutist perfection,
Right.
but compassionately. And even when I have to struggle against someone else, when I have to compete with someone for a marriage partner, for a job, for entrance to a university, I'm going to respect my competition and honor them, and never go about it from a position of malice or hatred, but recognize that, as I was just reading in a Native American account of deer hunting, he said, when I shoot the arrow when I shoot the moose, actually, Algonquin people, when I shoot the moose with my arrow, it is not I who kill the moose, it is nature who kills the moose. To recognize that we are instruments through which nature itself is operating.
Right.
That really contextualize all the actions in my life in a really rich way. It helps me sleep at night.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there's something with that. I dabbled in religion when I was growing up. When my parents weren't religious, they didn't force us, but when I was about 14, I went to a Baptist church a couple times, we grew up quote unquote Catholic. So I did Catholic a little bit, but I never found anything that landed. It always seemed like hypocritical, or like I would never do it right. I've already done so many dumb shit in my life at that point in time. Like, there's no way God could forgive me, but it wasn't until I found spirituality, or just the differences, right, that I understand there was a difference, that there was this understanding that, like, spirituality is, one of my favorite quotes is, religion is for people that are scared of hell. Spirituality is for people that have been through hell, and it's like, well, yeah, I've been through some hell, so this is the path that makes sense, because it seems like it's more forgiving. It seems like it's more malleable to what your purpose is, not I'm serving the purpose of this omnipotent being above me. I'm doing the work of the energy of the universe through this avatar that I have as a human being, and the path that I can find. I can egoically take my own path and say, no, this is right. This is what I feel is right. Or I could listen to that softer voice and maybe go this other path that might not seem right, might not make sense, but in 10 years, like, oh my God, here it is. Here we are. One of the things for me where I can attribute that is music. I've been playing music since I was like 13 years old. I was in a couple bands growing up, in high school and college, but nothing really ever stuck. I just do it for myself. I like to make myself happy, make, songs for my kids and, all that fun stuff. But it wasn't until maybe 3-4 years ago that I parlayed all that information into sound healing. It was like, oh, well, oh my God, this is what all that makes sense. Like all these different instruments that you can kind of randomly play, but you can keep a tone with. Now you have all these sound bowls, Tibetan bowls, tuning forks, and that, like, all of that weird, non-cohesiveness now makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to, like, just watch those little stones, watch those little breadcrumbs. It's like, oh man, this whole time, all right, I was doing it right. I thought I was doing it wrong.
What a wonderful process of discovery these journeys are, aren't they?
Right.
It seems to me that religions are attempts to sort of codify and systemize those spiritual impulses, those somebody had this incredible spiritual transformative experience, a Buddha, a Jesus, a Muhammad, and they struggle to teach the people around them like you and I try to do. And then they died, and somebody tried to write it all down, and then the text took on a kind of a life of its own, and then an institution surrounded that text to protect it. And then the institution, of course, wrote more and more regulations and codes to deal with all the confusion and chaos within the institution. Because if you've ever been on a committee, you know how quickly people disagree about the right direction in which to go.
Uh-huh.
And then the institution, give it a couple centuries, and the institution's emphasis shifts from the wisdom of the original teaching to the well-being of the institution.
Mm.
So I'm always kind of on the fence about religion. I recognize that for billions and billions of people on Earth, religion is a wonderful entrance into an opportunity to experience something beyond their lives, something transcendent, something profoundly meaningful, where their inner voice meets that cosmic voice.
Mm.
And they experience that through the Eucharist, or through the mosque, or through their Hindu holidays. And so religion at its best, I think, can serve in a powerful way to minister to billions of people and bring them closer to some kind of sanity and healing. The word religion comes from that Greek and then later Latin root religare, meaning to link back, to reconnect.
Mm.
And so I think the religious impulse is the impulse to come out of our, especially in modernity, to come out of our atomization, our individualization, our scatteredness.
Yeah.
We used to live in multi-generational homes in small villages for 100,000 years. Now we're all over the place and disconnected. And so religion maybe is a way for people to connect back through ritual, through song, through shared histories and traditions and readings, and find community in which they can begin to feel again like they are at home in the cosmos.
Right.
But at its worst, we all know it's easy to catalog the horrible abuses that come out of religious coercion, being told that you have to believe, even though everything about these alleged beliefs violate your own inner authority.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the struggle, is to find some kind of place where we can make peace amidst all those voices.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned the word remember earlier, just a little bit ago, and when we start to remember things, or we find passions in life, it's like almost this like remembrance. And for me, I actually had the word remember tattooed on my knuckles. I got it a couple of years ago, and I sat in a meditation one time, and it was an appreciation. Like I didn't set out to appreciate. I didn't set out for gratitude, but I sat down and just like was overwhelmed with gratitude, overwhelmed with the joy that I had with at that time, just starting with my sound healing and all the instruments that I was amassing and all the different stuff and all the different opportunities that I could help people with. And it was this idea that came over me that was this, like when we remember, right? I remembered how beautiful music makes me feel. And it's not like I just found that out. It's in remembrance of my energetic being from all these incarnations of all these different things that I've done throughout the eons of whatever life that I've lived. And so that kind of hit me as this thing like, well, when we find these passions in life, like let's say tomorrow, all of a sudden I discover I love massage therapy and I just love massage. Now, is that something that I just discovered, or was that something that I've been doing for long, long before this current lifetime? That is, I was a hands-on helper of muscle manipulation, of energy movement, and now I've just remembered how amazing that modality is, and I'm embracing it now in this lifetime. And so I think there's like there is this kind of thing where it might seem new because it's new to this being, but you've been doing that thing. You've just been waiting to remember how much that thing means to you so you can embrace it in this lifetime.
Nice. Yeah. No, right. You didn't need to look to outer sources or do a bunch of internet research, right,
Right.
to find these things. So we're still talking in a way about dharma.
Hmm.
There's a line in the Gita where Krishna says, "Our natures drive us to action."
Mm.
Free will also helps us choose which actions to take. But I'm always caught by that, our natures, and in modern lingo, we might even talk about genetic propensities, for introversion or extroversion, or is musicality kind of not determined by genes, but is it more likely in one person than another, and so on. I this all above my pay grade, but I'm fascinated by questions like that, nature versus nurture,
Right.
uh, um, and that is a reminder that what we do and who we are and how we spend our time and what we love, and the wisdom to fall in the direction of that which we love. That's how we build our best lives, to kind of let our soul tell us in which direction to go, while still keeping one foot on the ground anyway, so the rent gets paid. But
Exactly. The balance between the physical and the metaphysical. There's always that balance in there.
right.
Well, one of the things that I was really excited to talk with you about is just so again, my path with finding these texts was beautiful to find them, but then it's deciphering them, and even with Ignath Eswaran's versions that we talked about earlier, there's still a deciphering of, right. And by no means do I want this podcast to be like, what does the Gita mean, Peter? What does the Upanishads mean, Peter? But and because they land differently with however you read it, when you read it, what you're going through at that time in your life. And so I think what I really want to try to do is just give some people like a roadmap as to finding how it lands with them. Like, so as we read these somewhat confusing passages, how do I look at that to where like I can decipher this, like maybe this code or this intuitive nature of like maybe listening to how this lands with me, not just what the overall message is for this passage. So we talked about metaphors a little bit earlier, and this a lot of this stuff is very metaphoric, and the metaphors that might be being used are very used and make sense in the times that they were written, but in this current time, it's like, well, I don't know what that means. So how
Right.
do we look at, what some of these metaphors or some of these ideas and how they can land with, what we're experiencing in this current time frame?
To me, that's what teachers should do.
Yeah.
Is and in the education business, we talk about scaffolding, and that one of the meanings of that word is starting where students are. So instead of saying, well, you should care about this passage from the Upanishads because the great scholars all agree that it is blah blah blah, and instead, I think Joseph Campbell says it in one of his videos in the Power of Myth series, that he says, I don't believe in studying something because it is said to be important. I think when you get the right introduction to something, you are either called in that direction or you're not.
Hmm.
And if you're interested in the great wisdom texts of all the traditions, then because you've gotten a decent introduction to them somewhere along the way, then it's, I think, really important to have a guide on the side kind of to help you uh, appreciate how it does connect to where you are right here, right now, today.
Yeah.
And that's always an absolutely central priority for me, whether I'm in front of a classroom or shooting a YouTube video. I don't know, there's over 100 videos on my channel now of philosophical content, I
Hmm.
think. And I shot them all because of COVID, of course. And boy, we could just do a whole hour on that, right?
Yeah.
The yin and the yang of how that global nightmare, as nightmares, as catastrophes always do,
Hmm.
resulted in a lot of generation of a lot of interesting growth for a lot of people. And I suddenly found myself having to teach all my stuff online.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? So I just started setting up my phone on a tripod and pushing record in my house right over there, and doing little I'm like, I'm not going to do a 90-minute lecture. That's a lot of video.
Yeah.
But I'll do 20. I'll do little 20-minute videos. And I just started making those basically from outlines. I wasn't reading a script or anything, and it was always just the stuff I worked on in class. And the purpose of those was, as you have experienced also, is just, let's decode the Bhagavad Gita. Let's decode the Tao Te Ching. Like, why should I care about this?
Yeah.
What does it have to do with me? Why does it matter? And I'm always excited about that question, of bringing these things to life. So it wasn't hard for me to get excited about shooting all those videos. And then when somebody watches them, I hope they have an entry point to have their own experience around those texts. Like, for example, in the Gospels, Jesus is always an interesting example of what great teachers do. He comes into this agrarian, rural fishing community, and he's talking about the ineffable mystery of the cosmos, the source of all things. So what does he talk about? Lost sheep, fishing, weddings, planting seeds, good trees, bad trees. It's like he totally goes to where they live, and he uses rural agrarian metaphors. Now, I don't have any sheep or an olive grove,
Right.
and I don't grow wine. So when I read the Gospels, I have to like translate all those examples into the issues I'm dealing with: malware, finding a parking place, taxes, whatever. These are the challenges that I face. So you're right. Once you kind of develop a way of translating the metaphors, whether it's in the Gita or the Gospels, then you suddenly get down to the universal level.
Yeah, there was I can't remember who I was listening to. It might have been your channel, but if it's not, I'm mistaken. But somebody was talking about how the metaphor between Adam and the fruit, right? Adam and Eve and the fruit, and how so we were deceived that that something from nature could cause a divide, right? And so this metaphoric apple, we chose something from nature, and that caused us to forget how close to nature we are, how beautiful and divine that we are. So we keep searching for that divinity, but if you look at where we took that apple from, if we look at nature, nature is constantly giving us things to reconnect us. If you look at all the psychedelic medicines that are out there that are all plant medicines, there's countless ways that nature is looking to draw us back and be like, hey, no, you got the message wrong, right? There's all this fruit that's here for you to reconnect to nature, but we have to open ourselves up to the understanding that we are nature, that we can be back with nature. I think I did an episode a couple months ago, and we talked about the definition of nature. And in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition of nature, I'll paraphrase it, but basically it says anything created outside of man. So we're basically taking ourselves out of nature, out of the definition of nature, and say, hey, what we create is humanity, but what everything else outside of that's nature. But we create humanity. Yeah, right. It's like, no, we've removed ourselves from that which we emerged from. And that just, there's those little things that like you said, like we have these things that can give us an understanding of where to jump off at. Man, that was one of those things for me of that metaphor of bringing that together of like, wow, I think subconsciously, this my entire life until maybe about 10 years ago, I thought that I was living life wrong. Always, right? Because of whatever message that's put out there that'll never live up to whatever expectation that somebody else has for me. So it's nice to have this decoding and these hand holding sessions of like, this is the way this can land with you, right? And let's find this out and how it feels with your body, not just what somebody tells you should feel.
So when a beaver makes a beaver home, that's nature. But when a human being makes a shelter, that's a blight on nature.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I'm from the 70s. I went to school in the 70s, and I remember my biology teacher, his big passion was zero population growth. The ZPG used to be a thing in the 70s. Like the basic message of that sort of first wave of 70s environmentalism of Earth Day. And I lived through the oil spill in Santa Barbara. And we were all pissed off about the whole system and how it was just destroying the world, obviously. And then there was that sort of unstated and then later explicitly stated idea out of those early iterations of the environmental movement that human beings were a cancer on the earth that had to be destroyed or controlled.
Right.
And planet Earth would be much better off if we all just died. And it was like, okay, I get that. And there's lots of evidence to support that position, actually.
Uh,
But it's like that, what a strange divorce from the realization that I am made of the earth. Every molecule of my body came from the ground and came from living things that took star energy from the sun to transform into their own bodies, and make a head of romaine so I could have a Caesar salad.
right.
And it's like, I am all of this cosmic energy, motherfucker, just like everything else. And so it's like, why am I the problem? But obviously the problems come from human activity
Right.
and structural systems built on value systems that are unsustainable, and all of that work is absolutely crucial. But to demonize the existence of people themselves is a strange error along the way to where we do need to get.
Right. In that line of thinking, it kind of makes me think of asceticism, where like, yes, I can go live in a cave and just not be triggered by humanity and just have a loincloth and a fire and be cool. Right. But, but I need to be triggered. I need to know what I need to work on. Right. So I need to be part of humanity, and not only so I can help myself, but I can help others if they need that help as well. Right.
And this is the message of so many of these systems, again, to go back to the Gita,
Yeah.
all the way at the end in chapter 18, when Krishna says something like, the path is always sort of hard to see, just as a fire is surrounded by smoke, so too our minds are always kind of clouded. We don't see everything perfectly correctly. And so we never really have the big picture to be comfortable with not knowing, to be comfortable with ambiguity, and to be, I think, increasingly, I struggle to appreciate this more and more, to be comfortable with paradox. That two seemingly opposite truth claims can kind of both be partially true at the same time.
Right.
Like lying is wrong, but sometimes you need to practice some kinds of deception in order to further a greater good. And that's what makes adulting so confusing. is living in that indeterminacy. Indeterminacy, is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
So I'm afraid, it isn't, the answers we've been searching for. It's a way to live as non-violently, as compassionately, as actively as possible, causing as little destruction as possible. At least that's the way I sort of think about the path now.
Yeah, and there's there's a beauty in just being within the path. There's an old allegoric story that I use with my clients all the time. I've heard a couple different versions of it, so I'll just share one. But it's basically an old Chinese family living in like early times, and there's mom and a dad and a 16-year-old son. And the son is like the gem of the household. He's going to inherit the farm. He's going to do all the things, right? And so one day the boy's out in the yard at the farm, and he's tilling the field with the horse, and the horse stumbles and he runs over the kid's leg. Kid breaks his leg. The whole village shows up, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're so sorry. Your kid broke his leg. That's terrible." And the farmer's like, "We'll see," right? Then the next day, the army shows up. And hey, we're going to war for China. We're going to go, we're going to fight for China. We need all able-bodied men. So you're coming. Broken leg boy. Sorry, you can't come. You got to stay. Whole village shows up again. And we're like, oh my God, that's so lucky. Your kid doesn't have to go die in this war. That's amazing. And the farmer's like, yeah, we'll see. And that's the beauty of that. We have no idea. Yesterday, the broken leg was the worst thing that could have happened to this child. Today, it's the best thing ever. Like, we really don't know. If we could just be present with where things are going and just kind of feel it out and understand that, like, we're like, even like you said religion earlier, like religion's only about 2,000 years old. We don't know the full breadth of what religion can really offer. It's still basically a toddler, right? So it's doing its best. It's trying to do its thing. It's confusing people. It's mislabeling messages. But we're also humans that are absorbing these things and putting our own spins on this stuff, right? So if we can just kind of step back and be aware of the movement of life and stop trying to to direct it so much or put our stories on it, it can make a little bit more sense, but we're kind of programmed to try to manhandle life and say, no, that's not the way I'm going. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to learn how to do this. But my passion tells me I want to be a musician and just like go play shows, right? So, it's figuring out like how all that stuff lands with you and quieting down yourself enough that you can hear those voices and hear those paths.
And integrating those polarities, whether you refer to it in the sort of Chinese way of yin and yang or yin and yang, which is yang is in the Tao Te Ching is associated with, light and things that are, assertion, making plans, and then yin is associated with emptiness and not planning and spontaneity and all of that, all those polarities that I bet we're all familiar with. And then you look over in the Greek system and you have them personified as Apollo and Dionysus in a way. And as Nietzsche discussed it centuries later, the Apollonian impulse in us and the Dionysian impulse. Dionysus, the god of wine and excess and spontaneity and creativity, and Apollo, the god of reason and order and clarity. And we all have Apollonian energy and Dionysian energy in us. And guess what? Being a good musician, you better integrate both of those things. If you're just Dionysian, you're not really going to get very far in music, because music is science. It's measurements of time and rhythm and scale, and you have to pay attention to the other people in your band, and you have to show up on time. There's all kinds of Apollonian skills that make the creation of art possible.
Yeah.
And yet without that Dionysian juice, right, without that instinctualness, your music is just sort of mechanical, and it's not passionate, and it doesn't move anybody.
Yeah.
And so what if we saw our life kind of as that, Apollonian and Dionysian synthesis? Obviously, at certain times of the day or in certain activities, one ought to be more Apollonian or Dionysian. There's a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of rising and falling like tide. But as I think about my own effectiveness, there are definitely times when both of those energies better be drawn upon in order for me to, effort versus effortlessness. Right. I mean, don't we all have to kind of dance that dance every day? Surfing's a great example. You're not in control of the waves. And yet you have to work very hard to put yourself out in the right position to take advantage of that wave. There's a lot of perception, action, intentionality, ambition.
Right.
But then once you catch the wave, it's just all surrender. And that is a good way to think about our marriages, maybe, and our careers, and the way we raise kids. You don't just let kids do everything, and yet you're not the taskmaster either.
I love that. That's a beautiful analogy. That makes me think about, my ego when I first started my path is, my ego was very much in charge for a long time, and I drank and I did drugs and I was abandoning my father, for my kids and all this stuff, and it was that was the path. And once I started meditating, I pretty much went to the other side. Like, quit drinking, quit doing all that shit. And now I meditate like 10 hours a day. I'm like, well, one's not better than the other because I'm still not being present with myself, right? And so it's so frustrating because you realize you're doing something so innately wrong to your body, right? Drugs and alcohol. And so it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to stop that and I'll do the thing that is proven that is very healthy for my body, right? There's the woo-woo side of meditation, but there's also the science side that we have now, right? So now I just meditate, but and then that's wrong. It's like, well, God damn it. Like,
I'm the best meditator of all.
Right, exactly. But it is that balance. There is that middle ground that we have to find. Like like when people come to me and talk about killing their ego, I want to be rid of my ego. Well, God damn it. If you give your ego the full reign of your humanity, it's going to be a pain in the ass. But it needs to be there still, right? There is a balance between your ego and your metaphysical side. Your ego keeps you safe, keeps you understanding of what this humanness can bring you, whereas your metaphysical side can give you a little bit more understanding. But to kill one and to just embrace the other doesn't make sense, right? We need it all.
It's like the first thing you realize when you start spiritual work or when you try to get sober and you go to AA or whatever, the first thing you learn is, yeah, the ego is the trouble,
Yeah.
right? My self-centeredness. So must destroy ego. That's like your thesis. And then you eventually learn the antithesis. The opposite of that is like, wait a minute, as Deepak Chopra says, all of our hatred of the, and I'm paraphrasing, all of our hatred of the ego is the ego's favorite game. So it's just like, actually your real ego is just saying, yeah, kill the ego. It's like, it's just another way to exert selfish control over your life. This weird dream to kill ego.
Hmm.
And then and so the synthesis out of the polarity of the thesis and the antithesis, ego good, ego bad, the third stage that you sort of finally get to is the realization that my ego is just another tool in the kit, like my left hand. And I really need my left hand to type or to play chords on the guitar and hold my, you know, plate when I'm putting food on it with my right hand or whatever. It's just a thing that I need to use to live, to get stuff done. And it's neither my enemy nor, you know, recognizing that my left hand does some good work. Yeah. Letting my left hand run my life is weird.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where you eventually get, I think, with ego, and there's that middle path sort of thing again that we keep coming back to. There's that wonderful Zen ox herding pictures thing. There's the 10 ox herding pictures. I won't go through all 10, but it's sort of a visual metaphor for identifying that one wants to become enlightened is like looking for the ox. And then you eventually find it, and then you eventually get a rope around it and bring it back, and then the ox disappears, like in the 9th picture. And then the 10th picture, the monk, having attained realization, goes back into the marketplace and goes back to work, just doing their everyday job.
Wow.
That again, the purpose of all these spiritual longings is not to go live high alone on a mountain, but to be able to live among people in the world, performing the work that I need to perform, from a kind of in a kind of deeply contented and loving way. And that it's sort of a kind of a long road to get back home, isn't it? That's sort of the hero's journey, this big circle. But
Yeah.
that's maybe what we really want.
And I think that's, we're starting to prove that a little bit now with psychology and with, a little more cognition understanding, is that it's the journey that is the most beautiful part of life. It's not the attaining of the goal. It's the journey to find the goal and to get the goal. It's like, when I reach whatever goal that I've set in front of me, it's fleeting. It's like, oh, cool, I just did that, now it's gone. But all the
Right.
experience that you go through to get to that goal, the figuring out of yourself, the quieting of your ego, the embracing of your ego, the building of a team to help you with where you lack at, all these things that go into it build you as a person. And that's the beauty of life. It's not just like, hey, I just checked that box, good for me. It is. And I think for myself, once I realized that, because I was so task oriented, just task. And I wasn't even embracing the understanding of what the task was. It was just like, get it done. And now, I'm at a point now where it's like, okay, I'm going to change my daughter's light bulb in her room, and I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to just appreciate every time I turn my hand to the right and just think about what books she's going to read when she's now has this light, or what she can crochet now, or the homework she gets done, or, whatever it is, but like, I take the time. I see what's happening. I see the benefit that this is going to bring, and then I can move on to my next thing instead of just trying to rush through this life and get to that next thing, because the next thing is not going to make me happy. It's just another thing on my list.
I think meditation kind of teaches us that, doesn't it? To kind
Yeah.
of slow down and really feel more than even know the interconnectedness, the interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, of all phenomenon, all energy, all matter, all consciousness. And when you're screwing in that light bulb and you're thinking about, your daughter's poem that she's going to write someday or something, and it's how can you not smile and be joy filled
Yeah.
in this moment? And I think about religion that way more and more. And we were talking about that before. So often, some people in certain religions think of religion as a team, as a set of beliefs,
Yeah.
that you can only be called a Christian if you check all these boxes on this particular creed, or you make all these commitments to metaphysical claims, like Jesus was born of a virgin and died and rose on the third day. The Nicene Creed.
Yeah.
That's sort of a really old school kind of Roman legal way of thinking about a faith system. Maybe I've been thinking about it more and more this way lately, that maybe being a Christian or being a Buddhist is a path and not a place. It's a way of being in the world. It's not joining into a team which defines itself by the differences between it and the other teams. That, the way of, the first followers of Jesus, right before the Gospels were written, before the word Christian even came along, long before the church was established. They just called themselves the followers of the way, kind of Mandalorian, right?
All right.
And what a nice way of putting it. Jesus rarely asks us to believe anything. He just sort of asks people to act a certain way toward one another. So what if the way of Jesus or the way of Buddha is a journey and not a destination? What if it's not a corral but an open range? Not a safe harbor, but the open sea. And there's no map. There's, like Krishnamurti said, truth is a pathless land. And so if you want to call yourself a Christian or a Buddhist, to me, what those words now mean are, I am leaning in a certain direction. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to live more compassionately and less self-centeredly. And there's no map, but I'm open to all the hints. I'm open to all the grace. I'm open to the inner light. I'm open to the whispers that come up through spirit, that come to me from my sound healing teacher, from my Reiki master, from my yoga teacher, from my own meditations. And I think that's what, when Jesus went in the wilderness, when Mohammed went into the cave, when Buddha went out in the woods, they went out to finally get quiet enough to where these realizations could well up from within. And then later systems got built around their names. But I think all of us who call ourselves spiritual but not religious, some of us actually find ourselves participating in a religion again, but in a kind of a different way, maybe even the one of our childhood.
Right.
But now when we come back in and participate in the Eucharist, it's actually kind of an amazing experience, as opposed to just being forced to do this by our parents.
I think there is something with that for me too. There's that force of like, I don't want to be here. I'm doing all this shit. But when we can find it on our own, at least I know for myself, my ego is very much more in tune with things that I find on my own than something that shows me.
Yeah.
So, there is that path sometimes. And, for me, like, I think I had a really strong misunderstanding of what religion was growing up in the South, Southern Baptist, like I said, it was very hypocritical. They would,
Painful.
what's that?
It's painful.
It is, yeah. I was like maybe a 15-year-old kid. One day, John would be there. John, everybody was like, "Oh, John's great. We love John. John's fantastic." And then the next week, John wouldn't be there, and then all those same people would be like, "Oh, John's probably hungover, or John's watching the game." F John.
Yeah.
John didn't. John's not a real good Christian because he didn't. Like, what? Last week, John was like your best friend, and now you're talking shit about John. Like, what the hell, man? So that hypocrisy that was going on left and right.
Or he finally acknowledged his sexuality and realized he was no longer welcome in the Southern Baptist.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Right. I mean, I know so many people, and I meet them everywhere I go. I do a lot of speaking off campus and there are so many people who have been traumatized.
Yeah.
I mean, deeply wounded by their faith family of origin, kicked out of churches, told that they are an abomination. And so there is so much healing that has to happen around religion. And so I absolutely get it when people are just done. They're just done. And the first stop sometimes is atheism. And then it, for many, it often kind of evolves into an agnosticism. Well, I don't really know.
Right.
there is or isn't, but I know I can't hang out with those people over there anymore because they tried to destroy who I really was. And so that kind of coercion is just, it just gives religion such a bad name. And I think a lot of people are just reeling from that abuse,
Yeah.
frankly. And that's such a tragedy that the
Yeah.
very thing that is to restore us to wholeness is wielded as a sword that cuts us in two.
Yeah, there's a quote that I kind of makes me think about religion more than anything, but can be applied to any spirituality or religion. But it's, when you meet the Buddha on the road, kill the Buddha. And that was my experience with religion all the time when I was growing up. I'd meet these pastors or these people of clergy faith or whatever, like, oh, I will fix you, I will help you, come listen to me and listen to my words, God's words through me. Okay, right? It's like, and then I heard that. It's like, well, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, follow me, I got you, we're going to do this together, but you got to follow
Run.
everything I do,
Yeah.
run for the hills. Like, that person is not your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
That was one of those things for religion. Like, I have all those people that just like constantly tell me, listen to me, I'm going to follow, I'm going to show you how to do life. And then all of a sudden, here's the Bhagavad Gita or here's the Tao. The first
Yeah.
goddamn word of the Tao is like the Tao is before God. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, I never
Yeah.
thought of that question in my life. And then you're just going to open the book like that? Like, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. All
The
right, let's
Tao
do
that can
this.
be told is not the eternal Tao.
Right.
So the message of ineffability, like all of our thoughts about ultimate reality are not ultimate reality. And so this tension we're talking about right now exists. I've been doing some scripture studies lately just because
Uh-huh.
it was time. And just the difference between just Jesus and Paul. And they're both contemporaries, right? And so Jesus is rarely asking us to believe in anything. He's asking us to have an experience. And then in that, in the next decade, you have Paul writing all these rules and condemning all the people. The Greeks are too interested in wisdom, and the Jews are too interested in, here's a Jew, a Pharisaic Jew who's sort of dumping on Judaism and saying, you guys are not seeing how important Jesus is. And so the division begins very early
Wow.
to who's in and who's out. And so that tension exists as soon as somebody picked up a pen and started to try to write this stuff down. And so when you come upon books like the Tao Te Ching, it's such a breath of fresh air to hear this 25 century old Chinese poetry about how wisdom is something one experiences in nature, through one's own insights, and the less we say about it, the better. And the more you try to define it, the farther away it gets. And there's no rituals that are prescribed, and you're reading this going, oh my God, this is the best religion book of all, because it doesn't talk about religion at all.
Yep, totally. That was the book that opened my eyes to spirituality. That let me know
Yeah.
that there was something out there that I could sink my teeth into, that didn't tell me I was doing it wrong. It's like you were talking about earlier about surfing. Like it's such an intuitive experience, right? If you just try to force yourself into a wave, it's not going to work. You got to find the right place to catch the wave. Got to be in the right place of your board. All the things have to match up. But it's you doing that so many times that you instinctively and intuitively understand that. And for me, that was my first kind of like conscious intuitive drag was the move towards the Tao. It's like, I don't know why this book keeps coming around me. I had a girlfriend at the time that tried to get me to read it, didn't want to read it, had something else, it just kept coming, and I'm like, okay, world, got it, should read this book. I haven't read a book in 20 years, but I guess this will be the one I read. And it just it confused me. It brought a lot more questions than answers, which at that time frustrated me, but now I appreciate. But it was one of those books, and it was one of those moments of like, just listen to that quiet voice. Stop trying to manhandle life, and just listen to those synchronistic moments that happen around you all the time. Like, dial into that stuff and see how that lands with you.
the Taoist phrase is Wu Wei, and
Mm.
it means well, one way to describe it is creative letting be. It literally means non-action, but it's describing what we're talking about, a kind of non-coercive activity, which is how nature works. It's how water flows down a hill. It
Mm.
doesn't have a plan. It follows the natural line, what Alan Watts called the water course way.
Yeah.
And what if the next time I'm in a difficult meeting at work on a tough committee, or I'm navigating some challenging emails, or there's a little bit of a rough patch in my marriage. How do I come into that space without my egoic need to control everybody else? And as the phrase goes, read the room the same way that you would if you were in the water and you were trying to catch a wave. You are there to perceive and to respond and to find a way to align the energies moving through you with the energies that are moving around you.
Mm.
And guess what? That's the path by which you are going to get the most done, not by yelling and shouting people down
Right.
and coercing them into following your system. They have something to teach you, and less is more, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's going to get us further along than a kind of yang centric coercion. And that's why I think the Tao Te Ching acknowledges that most of us already know about yang. We know how to write to-do lists. We know how to be assertive. Those things matter.
Right.
But we have forgotten yin. We have forgotten the power of silence, of emptiness, of retreating. How do I fix a problem? Maybe I should wait for 3 days and see where it is in 3 days.
Yeah.
That line in the Tao Te Ching, what, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but, um, have the patience to wait until the mud settles. If I have a glass of water full of, and the water is all muddy and I just keep stirring it, it's going to stay opaque.
Yeah.
If I want the mud to settle, I have to stop stirring the water. And we actually know that in conflict management. It's what the cops do when they roll up on a domestic violence call, which is their most common call, right? A couple fighting, and the first thing they do is they physically separate.
Right.
They'll take him outside, they'll leave her in the kitchen so they can't see each other or hear each other. And then they'll usually just say, sit on the curb. And then they just wait for 30 minutes because it takes about that long for the adrenaline to come out of your body. And then finally, maybe people might be ready to explore different pathways.
Right.
And that that's a kind of a pretty smart thing to do, to kind of wait until the mud settles on its own. Because if you walk into a fight and you say, oh, come on, y'all, just hug it out. You love each other. It's never going to happen. The adrenaline's up too high. We're all limbic system, fight or flight. The knives were just about to come out.
Right.
So what if I kind of viewed my own problems in the same way? And again, we learn this in our meditation, don't we? The power of silence, the power of yin, the power of waiting, the power of emptiness.
Yep, definitely. And I think, the society that we're in right now, I mean, you can hear it tossed around like that yang energy can be perceived as the shadow masculine. I hear that a lot, where the overtly doing, we gotta perform, we gotta action, we gotta do all this stuff. In our corporate world, in our work life, you see a lot of people stepping into that shadow masculinity and from all different sexualities, from feminine
No matter
to
your gender of birth. Yes.
right, exactly, because it's that. But also the wounded masculine, another form of that is the fixer, the innate fixer, that we want to fix everything. And so it's that constant action. I can fix you. I can help you. I can do the thing. I can't let my energy just stop and just settle and just be, right? Because sometimes like for my kids, the best advice that I can give them and the best help that I can give them is to hold space and let them figure their shit out. Like, yes, I will help make sure that you don't kill yourself. I'll make sure that you don't severely hurt yourself or come back from a place. But you gotta, I mean, you kind of got to get out there and mess some shit up and figure out how to get out
Absolutely.
of it, you
Yeah.
know? And so here's your boundaries, here's your bumpers. I'm going to give you a big hug and make sure you're safe, but get out there and kind of figure it out yourself too.
Yeah, so much healing comes from that simple realization of toxic, the toxic fixer.
Yeah.
And conversely, when they meet their perfect counterpart, the damsel in distress, um, that's a codependency road to hell. But we carry all these characters within ourselves too. And it's one thing to talk about that extrinsically in terms of our relationships, our workplace or romantic relationships, our family relationships. But it feels like, one of the things we learned from the hero's journey study is that the fellowship of the ring, the the group of characters, the Wizard of Oz and Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Lion, whatever fellowship is making the journey
Uh-huh.
through the Jungian lens, those characters can very fruitfully be read as different disintegrated aspects of my own psyche. I have a Legolas in me who's the ruthless killer, the warrior. Sorry, gonna go Lord of the Rings on y'all
Do it.
here. And I also have Sam, who is the stalwart, loyal friend who wants to kill Gollum all the time,
Uh-huh.
because he's trying to kill this. He's apparently trying to kill them and steal from them. But Frodo is also, and he's in me too. He's this sort of Christ-like, and this is Tolkien's Christianity, his Catholicism coming through. Frodo is that Christ-like figure who sees the good, who sees that there is something in Gollum that is still redeemable.
Yeah.
He ends up kind of being wrong, but Gollum actually does play a huge instrumental role in the successful outcome of the quest.
Yep.
And that everybody has a role to play, even our enemies and so on. And that Wordsworth line, if each of us knew the secret histories of our enemies, it would be enough to lift all malice. We would suddenly see that our so-called enemies are often just deeply wounded, traumatized people flailing around dangerously at anything near them.
Yep.
And it never really was about us. And Gollum's a perfect example. Smeagol,
Right.
you find out he used to be a hobbit, but his obsession, his craving, dehumanized him, dehobbified him. And these are all wonderful ways that our children, when they read these books, or when I watch these films again, and when I read the books when I was a kid, this is the way literature and mythology and art brings to mind these powerful kind of, in this case, the lens we're looking at it through now, the sort of Jungian psychological idea that my soul is disintegrated.
Yeah.
And the goal is to kind of integrate them, to make peace with the mercenary in me. Because again, that's another stock character, right? In Star Wars, it's Han Solo, the Harrison Ford character, who is, I'm just in it for the money. I don't give a damn about your cause. There's always that guy,
Yep.
right? And they go through their own transformation. The Mandalorian is like, he's just a bounty hunter. He's just here for the money. How many credits am I going to get for this? And then you see, and we relate with them through our mirror neurons. We relate with these protagonists because because I've got a mercenary in me. I need to know, sure, I'll take that gig. How much does it pay?
Totally. Yep.
And it's like, how can I make that work? And so on. And to make that guy work for me instead of me work for him, to put it in those terms.
Yeah.
And that mercenary has some incredible skills that I can sometimes use to do the good work that I'm trying to do. So I love how literature and myth and Jungian analysis kind of help me even see my favorite old stories as another tool in the kit
Mm-hmm.
to help us the same way religion can at its best help us, and spirituality and all these practices to help me, again, in Jungian terms, integrate all these different aspects, even my shadow side,
Yeah.
and bring that home and say yes to it, and be my messy human self, and let perfection and sainthood go into the ash heap as fantasies and destructive fantasies that they were anyway.
Yeah, and you've mentioned the hero's journey a couple times now. Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's
Yeah.
journey, and that was
Oh, God.
that's such a beautiful understanding. Like that was one of those pieces for me that just made so much sense when I learned it. That the
Yeah.
archetypal like journey of life, but and as I hear you talk about the current myths that we have like Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, in a way it kind of makes me think about like books like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and all this stuff where there's these beautiful hero's journey allegorical stories of this like for the Mahabharata, this group of five brothers that are pious and beautiful, and they somehow lose their kingdom to their cousins, and all this stuff happens. That's where the Bhagavad Gita comes from. But
Right.
and so to me it kind of because like so growing up, like we mentioned earlier, there was a lot of the misgivings with religion, a lot of misunderstandings that spirituality was separate from religion, that you could have one without the other, or maybe they coexist together. But so with my kids, I didn't push any type of understanding on them because I didn't have it right back then when they were young. And
Right.
so in a way, there's all of these stories that are coming up that help kids and help these young adults embrace the understanding in a subconscious way of things like the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, where there's these allegorical stories wrapped up in these archetypical kind of like experiences that we have through life. And so without sitting down and saying like, hey, Jesus was this and then Paul and then the apostles, it's like, no, hey, here's Frodo, here's Sam. Yeah, hey, kind of the same but different, and it's kind of like working with the atmosphere that we're in, drawing
Yes.
on that archetypical hero's journey that subconsciously we all know that we're on, and then just layering in different variations of stories to see where you land within those kind of things. So, like, I don't know, in a couple centuries, are we going to be looking at Harry Potter like we're looking at the Mahabharata?
Absolutely, yes. I
Awesome,
can tell you. I promise you. None of us will be here to see if I'm right
right?
or wrong. I promise you, 500 years from now, just like we read these ancient texts, they'll be studying Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Harry Potter as the 21st century's iterations of the archetypes.
Right.
And as Joseph Campbell points out, that is in fact one of the principal jobs of the artist to recast these ancient universal forms into shapes that we recognize. So George Lucas reads Joseph Campbell's Here with a Thousand Faces, throws away his first draft scripts, and starts rewriting his Star Wars films. And he says, I'm going to put all of the classic 17 stages of Campbell's analysis of the hero's journey in this rocket opera and have it be a Saturday matinee shoot 'em up with funny characters and lots of fighting and all kinds of fun stuff. Make a popcorn movie that actually is also in all ways but name a sacred scripture
Yeah.
that tells that same story of the journey we are all on. I think that's a really powerful way to kind of look at it. And then that was my door. Again, I didn't grow up in a religious home, but there was kind of spirituality in the air through music,
Mm.
through some of the books that I read as a kid, through poetry. I started reading Walt Whitman when I was really young, and I'm like, this is hypnotic.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is about exactly, but something really trippy is happening here with the way he's breaking language down. And it's like hip hop kind of. It's like there's a flow here that I've never heard before, and it's thrilling. And it got in. And now I look back at Whitman now, and he's like the American Buddha. He's absolutely channeling all of this kind of non-duality philosophy in nature and the divinity of nature, and Emerson and Thoreau and all those guys. They were getting it done in the 1830s and 1840s and 50s. And so that's thrilling to me that this is just the one job and here you and I are today, and all the folks listening, where we're alive now, and we have that opportunity to, with our voices, with our art, with our longing, to kind of create the next set of expressions, knowing there's nothing new under the sun, And yet each new generation, each new successive wave of generations needs its new songs
Yeah.
and its new poems. And the art form, the media keeps changing, the media is now visual, and not nobody's really reading novels anymore, for example. And I read a long article today about how people in my line of work in the humanities, English majors, philosophy majors, those departments are sort of collapsing
Mm.
in an alarming way. And kids coming up today are bringing a different set of skills, but under the surface, in the 18th century, everybody learned Latin in
Right.
college, and nobody does that anymore. And in the 20th century, everybody in the English department studied literature and the great novels and the canon. And less is that happening now. And English professors are now asking openly, should we just watch Breaking Bad and talk about? And I'm serious.
Right. Okay.
That's the medium now in which we are doing really amazing storytelling.
Right on.
And a long form television is an untapped source of gold. All of our favorite long form shows, Mad Men and Breaking Bad and whatever,
Yeah.
are literature. And we don't think of them that way yet, but
Yeah.
maybe in 100 years they will.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that, being in that profession as well. Like, there's like this side of you that could be lamenting, like, oh my God, this whole the department might be blowing up, this whole, my career. But
Yeah.
being witness to it, you could be part of that adjunct for change, right? So it's like, what can we help usher in that's going to be the new thing that helps people learn and grasp this understanding more, instead of being like, well, shit, now I'm not going to be able to do the pattern making thing that I'm used to doing because that's what I'm used to. I'm comfortable doing that. It's like, oh no, let's shake this up. Let's become super conscious and understand, like, we're helping this understanding evolve. We're helping this change.
Yeah. Look at Shakespeare's plays. I mean, when he wrote those plays, he wrote them brilliantly for his audience, for his time. He spoke the English that they spoke in the street. He talked just like they did at the butcher shop and in the tavern. Now we need freaking footnotes to understand what the hell anybody's talking about in Shakespeare, right? And yet he wrote those plays for the groundlings and for the expensive seats. And the groundlings were the cheap seats in the dirt around the theater, around the stage, not the fancy boxes up in the back of the theater where the nobles sat.
Yeah.
And he knew that he had to insert a dogfight, or a sword fight. He knows he needed a joke here or a kiss. He was making popcorn movies in a way that hit on, that collapsed the so-called distinction between lowbrow and highbrow. And then in the centuries that followed, when you needed professors to interpret Shakespeare for you, Shakespeare became highbrow.
Yeah.
Nobody give a damn about Shakespeare except elites. And now it's almost entirely gone. And so I wonder if art forms kind of go through that kind of evolution in their own time, of starting out kind of mainstream. And I wonder about the Ramayana and the Epic of Gilgamesh, and all those old stories. Those were just entertaining tales told around a fire that eventually needed interpretation by professionals to even make sense. And then they became elite. And while in every century, there's always the churning out of the popular entertainment. And so I think a lot about what expressions we're enjoying today, our films and our video games, right? Because my students don't watch TV really, and they don't go to the movies because it's really expensive. All media to them comes through their devices,
right?
And they're just as likely to watch YouTube, anime, or listen to podcasts as they are to watch network television, let alone HBO, which is expensive.
Yeah.
And so they play video games though, and I'm too old to have been really caught up in that world. The last video game I played was Pong in a bar in 1982 or something. And I'm like, nah, it's not for me. And I just never went back. And now I'm in a Best Buy or whatever, and I see the 3D and the stereo sound, and I see, and it's like video games are this incredible form of fiction, form of storytelling, where the viewer is in the movie.
Yeah.
And the action that he or she is taking, the decision that they're making is altering the outcomes of the flow of the movie. I'm like, this is mind blowing. And it also makes playing the game unique to each player.
Yeah.
And my jaw kind of hangs down when I think about how that mode of storytelling, it's changed the whole industry. There's a whole group of storytellers who are reading Joseph Campbell and the Ramayana and all that stuff and putting it into these stories. And the good news is the students that come into my world mythology class, they already know everything about world mythology, like all the gods and goddesses, because they've been playing these games since they were 8.
Right.
And I didn't have that coming in. So I'm not pessimistic about what's next. I do know that what's alive now is going to wither away, though.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought up the video games. That's something that I think, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I wasn't a gamer. We didn't have money for that stuff growing up, but,
Yeah.
friends adjacent, we're all big into like the James Bonds and like the early role-playing games and all that stuff. And it got a lot of shade thrown at it. Oh, you're just a video gamer, all this stuff. But besides the fact that it's like $1 billion industry, there's people making tons of money on this stuff now. But it's giving this younger generation an understanding that maybe they don't understand, like what the full breadth of that story is that they're working through, or the full understanding of like the tasks they have to complete. But they're working in different ways that we don't know, right? And that we can't work. And I think there's obviously a reason for it. But as that generation gets older and starts to go into the 20s and 30s and 40s and start to get into the careers, I'm really excited to see how that skill set, and that not only just the tactileness of your hand-eye coordination, but like being able to think on the spot like that, having all these different role-playing and situations coming up. Right. And there's going to be a beauty in that where, we might look at it in a confusing way now. That might be the thing that saves the world down the road. Like, we have no idea.
No, we have no idea, and we have no say, and we have no choice.
Yeah.
And so there's that sense of surrender again. When I read Lord of the Rings, I was a passive observer. I was in the room with all those characters, but I never was allowed to say anything or do anything. But I still felt absolutely alive. And that's what great books and films can do. But in the game world, you have all of that and the addition of having agency in the story. And you're right, that's going to change consciousness. We create these machines, and then these machines shape us.
Right.
And there's no going back. And Pandora's box, right? It's out. And so let's just see what could come from it. Of course, a lot of video games are shooting people constantly. Right. They're war games. Okay. But that's really, and those might be the big popular ones, and 'twas ever thus, violence and all that. But there's also a lot of beautiful problem solving and soulful exploration that goes on in other games as well. So yeah. I'm not here to assess the current state of gaming, because I don't know anything about it. But I talk to my students about it all the time, and they tell me there's a lot of really fascinating stuff happening there that is well, like I said, it's everything's going to be different.
Yeah. Well, there's the gentleman named Simon Sinek that I love listening to. He's a big motivational speaker, and he talks about the vessel that we have for delivery for certain things. Right? Let's take video games, like you were just talking about. So a lot of the video games might be shooting video games, might be violence. A lot of that overtones in there, but the vessel is there, right? Now we've know that video games can capture people's attention, can teach them skills, can do all this stuff. So his example was fast food, right? So we look at fast food, and we know that fast food is like, it's really bad for our health. It's generally high calories, low nutritional value, but it's fast, it's easy, it's quote unquote affordable. So the vessel itself works, right? The vessel for getting food into these rural areas of the world are very, very clear and very efficient. We'll take supply chain out of it for now, but we have the vessel. We just have shitty products. So if we take the vessel that's there, we already have the understanding that fast food works. Let's just put better food into it, right? Now we have salads, we have higher, low calorie, high nutrition, whatever it is, right? And then we utilize that vessel. So same kind of idea. It's like, the vessel of video gaming might not be broken. It just has to get it out there, right? To make sure that we can get it to the masses. And then we
Yeah.
start to fill in the blanks from there. Now we start to make it more,
Nice.
journey based. How can you accomplish this task? How can you find this, whatever, right? But without the violence behind it. So it's like sometimes
Yeah.
like the vessel's there. We gotta play with the game. We gotta play with the toy. Know how to break it. Know how to misuse it. And then we're like, okay, so let's play it like this. Let's do this now instead of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The medium is never entirely the problem.
Right.
It can also be seen as the solution. And it's about using any tool we have consciously. Ever since we first picked up a bone, to use it as a hammer. You can bash somebody's skull. I'm thinking of 2001: A Space Odyssey, the opening scene. You can use it to get food, or you can use it to murder your rival. You know? So, it is never really the tool's fault, I guess you could say, and that maybe that's putting it too glibly, but there is a lot of good to come from all of these changes, and I don't predict the future. I long ago quit trying to do that.
Yeah. Well, so we're getting kind of close to our time here, but I want to just really, before we get to your music, what book right now, like what is the out of all the different types of variations of books, whether it's biblical scripture, the Mahabharatas, like the big epic stories to the very simple Ruby poems, what are you kind of like moving towards right now, or what's kind of alive in you with any of those?
Oh, I got a couple right here. It's funny
Awesome.
you asked this. Yeah. Oh, that's right. We're not doing video, huh? But I'll just tell you, um, uh, I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I'll hold it up so you can see it, Adam.
Okay.
This is a collection of transcripts of teachings of an Indian teacher named Nisargadatta Maharaj in the 20th century,
Okay.
and he's one of the great teachers of non-duality, what we would call Vedanta, or more specifically Advaita Vedanta. And he's so down to earth and so basic and so clear, and I just keep rereading this book over and over and over again. It's so beautiful. And another book that I have been turning to a lot lately is called The New Seeds of Contemplation
Ah.
by Thomas Merton.
Okay.
So Thomas Merton is a Cistercian or Trappist monk who he died a couple decades ago, but he's a Roman Catholic voice, and that's not maybe everybody's tradition. It's not mine either. But I ran across him in my academic study of religion and Christianity in particular. And he really is a remarkable figure, not only on the contemplative life and on monasticism, but on the intersections of Buddhism and
Mm.
Christianity. And he spent a lot of time in Asia conferencing with Buddhist monks. In fact, he died in Thailand at one of those conferences. And his translation of Zhuangzi, one of my other favorite Taoist poets, is my favorite translation. So here's this Roman Catholic contemplative, Thomas Merton, who dove into a study of Eastern philosophy um, and writes about it so brilliantly and powerfully that it just affirmed me in that idea that there is great wisdom and truth in every tradition. And there are people who see outside the boundaries of the voices within their own tradition who are trying to build walls.
Uh,
And it liberated my kind of me trying to keep Christianity at arm's length, like there was something wrong with it.
yeah.
And voices like that kind of helped me drop some of those illusions. So those
Beautiful.
are a couple of books that I've been enjoying lately.
Well, there's both those books just went on my list. I've been
Right
excited to
on.
dig
Good.
into it, and man, I hate to talk about this last, but your music, man, I've really been enjoying your music. I've been listening to the Two Pines album. I think it
Oh,
came out in
thank
like
you.
2014, a couple years ago, a number of years ago.
Correct. Correct.
But it's got such a good feel. Like it's a good, like for me, it's a good, like get your day going Monday morning, kind of like
Ah,
just like kind of mellowy kind of album.
yep.
But you've got like the Coyote project you've been working on. You've got, all these different bands that you've done. Man, I love that. I just love like when people explore their creativities, right? You're doing it in your personal work. You're doing it in your music work, your surfing work, all this stuff. What's on the horizon with your music right now? Are you like ready to put something out? Are you kind of working on something that you already have out?
It's a great series of questions. I ask myself those questions all the time. You know, here's the reality. I'm 64. Not that I'm too old to make music, but I'm kind of at a different place in my life than I was 20 years ago. When I kind of came up out of the San Diego kind of singer-songwriter folk acoustic scene, and playing all the coffee houses with my acoustic guitar and like solo or duo, and that's where I was back in the 90s. And I made because my brother-in-law, who had a recording studio in his house, he said, "Hey man, come over, we'll make an album." So so we made my first album, Frame, and that came out in 2002. And then I just put a band together because the album tracks had bass and drums on them, and then me playing all the guitars.
Uh-huh.
So that's when the Coyote Problem was born, and we made an album in 2005 called Wire, and then in 2007 called California. And both of those records did pretty well regionally.
Okay.
Got some San Diego Music Awards, and that's kind
Yeah.
of fun. And you get a little trophy, and it just means more people heard the music. And yeah, it's for anybody who wants to hear it. I have a Bandcamp page that you can find online. And yeah, I grew up in the 70s, right? So I came of age musically, not just, of course, Beatles and Stones and like everybody else, but more on that sort of Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, CSNY, James Taylor,
Uh-huh.
Jackson Brown. Did I say Joni Mitchell? Probably. I'll say her again.
Yeah.
Just the idea that someone could grab a guitar and kind of write really personal songs that even got pretty poetic sometimes, Dylan, obviously. And then I fell in love with the country side of things through Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris and that whole LA country scene, particularly New Riders of the Purple Stage and the Flying Burrito Brothers and all that Joshua Tree shit. And
Yeah.
like Merle Haggard, Bakersfield, and which is quite different than the top 40 Nashville scene, right? And all
Yeah.
those Texas singer-songwriters, and that's what we call Americana or alt country. And today, artists like Steve Earle and too many others to mention. So that's kind of where I land musically. I just like to empty it out. A little steel guitar is nice, but basically four on the floor or maybe a waltz if I'm feeling exotic. And Neil Young's Harvest is sort of the
Uh,
scripture of that kind of music. And so that's been my lane, and I've always done it, and I'll always keep doing it. I don't know if I have another album project coming out
okay.
because albums cost about 20 grand to make,
Yep. Yep.
and nobody buys CDs anymore. You may have noticed, and there's no radio. Radio's dead,
Uh-huh.
and so it's like what we started talking about at the top of our podcast. This in regards to YouTube, that we live in a great time, right? The democratization of all media, and there aren't gatekeepers anymore.
Hmm.
And there's no record companies anymore. There's no radio anymore. And so every kid with a laptop can make an album. But the problem is every other kid on the street is making an album. And how do you get anybody to hear your stuff? And so that whole machinery that when I was a kid, there was FM radio and my favorite DJs would play the songs that became the soundtracks of my life.
Right.
Those were the curators of culture. And now we live in an uncurated culture. The only thing curating for us is the YouTube algorithms. Because of the last three videos I watched, it's going to recommend, well, you should see these,
Yeah.
and so some AI thing is doing that. And it's good and bad, right? I'm
Right.
not here to lament this, but it's like it's made it possible for independent artists to be found or to have a place to release their music. But it's also created such an overwhelming flood of content that nobody can find you.
Right.
And so I don't know what's next, but I keep writing songs and playing little shows locally. I don't do the band thing anymore.
Okay.
I'm the folk singer guy with one guitar, and I do a few concerts a year around here. But I still will always write songs, and I love what happens when you put a few words down and a few chords to it.
Yeah.
It's a mysterious lure.
Yes.
I'll never stop doing that.
I love that. And I think you said it perfectly. Like we're in the midst of change, and change is cumbersome and awkward, right? The music industry needed to change for a number of years.
That's right. It wasn't great before either.
Man, yeah. And now we're just in the, like we're in that Wild West phase where anybody can do anything. I mean, shit, we used to have to pay money to do podcasts, and now there's platforms out there to put this stuff out there for free. Same like we were just talking about with YouTube, right? We used to have to like pay recording producers and do all this stuff. And now it's like, no, here's my iPhone. My iPhone has has a better microphone than the, the recording microphones I used back in the early 2000s to
Yep.
record professional bands, right?
Hell
Like
yeah.
we could do a lot of shit with this stuff now.
It's amazing, right?
It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
I
It's
was
really
I was
cool.
actually listening to an interview with D'Angelo not too long ago, the musician D'Angelo,
Yeah.
and he was, because D'Angelo back in the '90s, he revolutionized what they call drunk drumming, right? That was just a hair off, like it wasn't perfect, it was just kind
Ah,
of little like staggering, but now we're in an age where everything's quantized and everything's auto-tuned, right? And so there's that argument where now we have perfection, but we have no soul, right?
yeah.
Because everything's on the one. It's exactly on the one. There's no a half. It's exactly on the one. And every pitch is corrected to the sharp or the flat. There's no more. It's just right there.
Yeah.
So are we taking the soul out of it? But again, it's that we're in that weird changing phase where things have to change, and in that changing phase, like in the chrysalis, like that caterpillar becomes like this gooey mess of all this weirdness before it emerges as a butterfly, and we're just kind of in that gooey mess of weirdness in the music industry or in life,
The
really.
core and it's an ancient question: is the technology going to determine our lives, or are we going to use the technology to create a more humane kind of world? The Darth Vader character in Star Wars. I mean, what Lucas did there was really powerful. That not only did he go to the dark side, but he also became a machine, and he became a servant of the state, and the state is a machine. And so, are we going to lose our humanity and serve the system, or are we going to use these tools and systems to serve our humanity? We have to keep fighting for that. And you're right. Once you have auto tune and pitch correct and all those time lock, you can move you can move the snare attack visually with your Pro Tools with your
Uh-huh.
mouse. It's like I don't know. I kind of like those old Stones albums that were 28 minutes long, and the song sped up by the time you got to the end because
Right.
they just played to whatever Watts was doing.
Uh-huh.
And it's like they were snapshots of a live performance, and there's a role for both,
Yeah.
and that's what artists are charged with. It's like use the tools, but don't let the tools dictate to you what the product is.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Well,
Well, it's been a joy being with you, Adam. It's been really fun. We could go for a couple more hours if you want.
I was just thinking the
Save
same
money
thing,
being
man.
here.
Like, shit, I've already got notes for future conversations. I'm like,
Right
man, okay,
on.
we could do this. All right. Well, Peter, I thank you so much, man. I've really enjoyed getting to know you better and hearing about your path, and thank you for helping us like understand these seemingly complicated scriptures and these texts, giving us an approachability, at least a place to start. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, please do. Like that's one of my favorite resources right now to help me understand what this is. So thank you so much for like everything that you do. Music, you're helping humanity, your just involvement with life is beautiful, and I deeply appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Same to you. Everything you just said to me. We're all just walking each other home, as
Ah,
Ram Dass said, and it's all the little things that add up to the one big thing. It ain't no big deal, really, is it? All these things we do, but collectively, something we hope is going in the right direction.
thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate you, brother. I look forward to chatting with you again.
Let's do it.
All right, brother. Have a
All
great
right,
day.
man. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for spending time with Peter and I. Check out the show notes for links to get in touch with Peter, listen to his music, or find his YouTube channel. Also, ways to support and listen to the show. Obeisances and love. We'll see you next time.